Welcome back to my channel. And if this is your first time here, hi, I'm really glad you're here. I hope what I'm about to share can help you look at spending in a gentler way with a little less pressure. Honestly, even as I'm sitting here filming this, I'm still not over the shock. Just last night, I sat down to review my monthly expenses, not to judge myself for buying anything expensive, but simply to see where my money actually went and how much of it I spent just to feel a bit better when I was tired. And that's when I noticed something uncomfortable. So many things I bought weren't because I truly needed them, but because I was exhausted, overwhelmed, or just wanted some instant relief. The problem is that feeling never lasts long. The stuff piles up, the space feels smaller, my mind feels heavier, and I'm still just as tired as before. That's when I started asking myself, why am I working so hard? But my money isn't making my life feel lighter. In fact, it feels like it's doing the opposite. From that question, I began to change the way I look at shopping. Not by forcing myself to save, and not by cutting out everything that brings me joy, but by learning to recognize when I'm spending because of a real need and when I'm just using money to calm my emotions. And once I started making these small changes, I realized that you can actually do things like notice the moments when you want to buy something simply because you're stressed, tired, or emotionally drained. Reduce that. I regret this already feeling after buying something or owning things you barely use. Pause before spending without having to force or guilt yourself. Feel lighter and less pressured when you look at your finances. Save money for things that truly matter and bring long-term value. In this video, I'm going to share 10 simple habits that completely change the way I spend money. These aren't advanced finance tips or complicated systems. They're very real, very practical, and easy to apply in everyday life. And especially the last tip is something I had never thought about before, but it made the biggest difference for me. So make sure you don't miss it. And now let's start with the first tip. The first thing that helped me the most sounds very simple, but it completely changed how I spend money. I stopped forcing myself to not want things, and instead I learned how to delay the purchase. Before, whenever I saw something that made me feel even a little better, a kitchen gadget, a decorative lamp, a new notebook, my brain immediately said, "You deserve this. Just buy it." And most of the time I did, not because I truly needed it, but because I was tired and didn't want to think anymore. So I tried something different. Whenever I felt the urge to buy something, I told myself, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying not now. I would give myself 48 hours before checking out. No arguing with myself, no guilt, no forcing logic. Just time. Let me give you a real example. I once really wanted a small coffee machine for my room. I imagined peaceful mornings, better routines, feeling more put together. Normally, I would have bought it the same day. But this time, I wrote the item down and waited 2 days. After those 2 days, I realized what I actually wanted wasn't the machine. It was the feeling of slowing down in the morning, and I already had that without spending money. By the way, while I was working on this habit, I noticed something else connected to it. Sometimes the heaviness doesn't just come from spending, but from the space we live in. I'll talk more about that in the next video about small changes at home that instantly make everything feel lighter, both mentally and physically. What surprised me was how often the desire disappeared on its own. And when it didn't, when I still wanted the item after waiting, I bought it without regret. Because by then I knew it wasn't an emotional impulse. It was a conscious choice. When you apply this, you'll start to notice a few things very clearly. You'll see how many buying urges are actually emotional waves that pass if you don't act immediately. You'll feel less pressure because you're not constantly negotiating with yourself. And most importantly, when you do spend money, it feels calm, not rushed, not reactive. This tip isn't about discipline. It's about giving your emotions time to settle before letting them use your money. And once you experience how powerful that pause is, it becomes much easier to move on to the next habit. After I started delaying my purchases, I noticed something interesting. Not every urge to buy comes from the same place. Sometimes I want to buy something because I genuinely need it, but many times the desire comes purely from how I'm feeling in that moment. And if I don't recognize that difference, no matter how long I wait, I can still end up buying for the wrong reason. So I built a very small habit. Whenever I feel like buying something, I pause for a few seconds and ask myself one simple question: why do I want this right now? No overthinking, no long analysis, just that one question. For example, there was a time I really wanted to buy a small Bluetooth speaker. In my head, I pictured cozy evenings with music playing in the background. But when I checked in with myself, I realized that what I was actually feeling was loneliness. I didn't want the room to feel so quiet. What I needed wasn't the speaker, it was sound and connection. So instead, I played music from my phone, turned on the TV for background noise, or called a friend. And surprisingly, the urge to buy disappeared pretty quickly. After that, I started giving each buying urge a name in a very simple and honest way. Buying because I'm tired, buying because I feel lonely, buying because I'm comparing myself to others, or buying because I truly need it. Just naming it already made me more aware and grounded. When you try this, you'll notice a clear shift. You stop treating every desire to buy as the same. You become more aware of which emotion is driving your spending. And more importantly, you start solving the real issue instead of using money as a quick emotional fix. This habit doesn't take away the joy of shopping. It simply helps you buy for the right reasons. And when you buy for the right reasons, there's much less regret, less self-blame, and a stronger sense that you're in control of your money, not the other way around. And once I started naming my buying urges, I realized something else. Many times I wasn't spending because of strong emotions at all. I was spending on autopilot, and that's exactly why I needed the next tip. There was a moment when I looked back at my purchase history and honestly couldn't remember when I decided to buy half of those things. Not why, but when. That's when it hit me. A lot of my spending didn't come from emotion or intention. It came from momentum. You know that feeling you open a shopping app without a clear goal just to kill time? You scroll while waiting for something. You add items to your cart almost absent-mindedly. And suddenly you're paying not because you made a conscious decision, but because the process carried you there. So instead of asking myself, how do I stop spending? I asked a different question. How do I break the flow? One rule made a huge difference for me. I never finish a purchase in the same moment or place where the urge started. If I add something to my cart, I don't check out right away. I close the app, I stand up, I change rooms. Sometimes I just wash my hands or get a glass of water. It sounds almost too simple, but that small physical shift interrupts the automatic loop. Here's a real example. I used to scroll online stores at night before bed. It became part of my routine. One evening, I added a desk organizer to my cart. Nothing urgent, nothing special. Normally, I would have checked out without thinking. But instead, I closed the app and went to brush my teeth. When I came back, the urge was gone. I didn't even feel like opening the app again. What I learned is this autopilot spending depends on continuity. It needs you to stay in the same posture, the same mindset, the same screen. The moment you interrupt that flow, your awareness comes back online. When you start doing this, you'll notice how often you spend simply because it's easy, not because it truly improves your life. Spending becomes a choice, again, not a reflex. And that alone reduces so much unnecessary pressure around money. This tip isn't about self-control or discipline. It's about designing small interruptions so your habits don't make decisions for you. And once you stop spending on autopilot, you'll start noticing something else. Many purchases don't feel heavy because they're impulsive. They feel heavy because you never actually felt the money leaving. And that's exactly what we'll talk about in the next tip. One of the biggest reasons I used to overspend wasn't because I was careless. It was because spending didn't feel like spending anymore. The money left my account quietly, invisibly, and without resistance. And when something doesn't feel real, it's very easy to overdo it. At some point, I noticed that the purchases I regretted the most all had one thing in common. I barely noticed the payment. A tap, a saved card, a confirmation screen, and it was done. No pause, no awareness, no sense of loss. So instead of trying to restrict myself, I focused on one goal, bringing weight back to the act of paying. One small change made a big difference. For non-essential purchases, I stopped using auto-saved cards. I forced myself to manually enter my payment details each time. That extra 20 or 30 seconds gave my brain time to catch up. Suddenly, I wasn't just buying an item, I was actively choosing to give up that amount of money. Here's a simple example. I once wanted to order a storage box online. It wasn't expensive, and I could easily afford it. But when I had to type in my card details, I paused and thought, is this actually worth the money? Or am I just trying to organize away my stress? That pause didn't always stop me from buying, but when I did buy, I felt clear about the decision. You can also make money feel real in other ways. Say the price out loud before you pay. Convert it into hours of work. Or imagine what else that same amount could support in your life. These aren't guilt tactics, they're awareness tools. When money feels real again, spending naturally slows down. You don't feel restricted, but you also don't feel disconnected from your choices. You start trusting yourself more because every purchase comes with intention. And once you reconnect with the feeling of paying, you'll notice another pattern. Many things you buy aren't solving a problem, they're trying to replace something you actually need. And that's where the next tip comes in. Have you ever noticed how convincing your thoughts sound right before you buy something? Everything suddenly feels reasonable. This will help me focus. This will make life easier. This is exactly what I need right now. And in that moment, the purchase feels like a solution, not a want. What changed things for me was noticing a simple pattern. The urge to buy often appeared at the same time as discomfort. When I felt stuck, I wanted tools. When I felt insecure, I wanted new clothes. When I felt overwhelmed, I wanted something that promised order. The object looked different each time, but the feeling underneath was always asking for relief. So I stopped asking myself, should I buy this? And started asking a different question. What am I actually trying to fix right now? Here's a concrete example. One afternoon, I felt scattered and behind on everything, and I suddenly wanted to buy a new planner. In my head, it made perfect sense. A fresh planner meant a fresh start. But when I paused and asked what I really needed, I realized it wasn't a planner. I needed clarity. I didn't know what mattered most that week. So instead of buying anything, I wrote down the 3 most important tasks I needed to focus on. That one action gave me more relief than any new planner ever had. When you practice this, something important shifts. You separate the problem from the product. Sometimes buying the item is still the right answer, and that's completely fine. But many times, the real solution is simpler, cheaper, or doesn't involve spending money at all. This habit doesn't make you spend less by force. It makes you spend smarter. You stop using purchases as emotional shortcuts and start responding to what you actually need in that moment. And once you begin solving the real need instead of buying around it, you'll notice another pattern. Many purchases. Picture this for a second. The version of you in your head is calm, organized, productive, and consistent. She wakes up early, sticks to routines, cooks balanced meals, and uses everything she buys exactly as intended. And most of the time, the things we purchase are for that version of ourselves. But here's the truth. We don't live as our ideal self every day. We live as our real self, tired, busy, inconsistent, and human. And a lot of wasted money comes from buying for a life we don't actually live. What changed my spending habits was learning to ask one honest question before buying. Would I still use this on a bad day? For example, I once considered buying a full set of glass food containers because I imagined myself meal prepping every Sunday. It looked so reasonable. But when I thought about my real routine, long days, unpredictable energy, I knew I wouldn't keep up with it. I already had containers that worked fine, so I didn't buy the set, and I saved myself both money and guilt. When you start buying for your real life, not your ideal one, a few things shift. You stop buying things that require a personality change to work. You choose items that fit into your current habits, not the habits you hope to have someday. And you feel less disappointed with yourself afterward. This doesn't mean you give up on growth or improvement. It simply means you stop using shopping as a way to pressure yourself into becoming someone else overnight. And once you align your purchases with the life you actually live, you'll start seeing another pattern. Many things we buy don't fail because they're bad. They fail because we already own something that does the job. And that leads us straight into the next tip. Most of the time, the urge to buy doesn't come from a real lack. It comes from forgetting what we already have. Instead of asking, "Do I need this?" I started asking a different question. What am I already using to solve this? That one shift completely changed how I see buying. For example, whenever I felt tempted to buy a new organizer, a new app, or a new tool to get my life together, I forced myself to pause and look around. Was the problem actually the lack of an item? Or was it friction habit? Or overwhelm? More often than not, I already owned something that could do the job well enough, it just wasn't perfect aesthetic or new. And realizing that saved me from replacing functional things with slightly better looking versions that didn't actually improve my life. This mindset also removed a lot of pressure. I stopped believing that progress required a purchase. I didn't need a new notebook to start planning better. I didn't need a new bottle to drink more water. I didn't need new containers to feel organized. When you assume you already own the solution, buying becomes a last step, not the first. You give yourself permission to try. First adjust, second and purchase only if something truly doesn't work. And once you start doing this consistently, you'll notice something surprising. Many buying urges disappear the moment you realize the solution is already within reach. But even when you already have enough, there are still moments when you feel a strong pull to buy, not because you're missing something, but because the desire feels intense in that exact moment. And that's what the next tip is about. There's a very particular state of mind that shows up right before most regretful purchases. It's not excitement in a happy way, and it's not clarity either. It's that slightly anxious, restless feeling where everything in you says, "I should get this now." Once I became aware of that feeling, I realized something important. Urgency is rarely a sign of need. It's usually a sign of emotion peaking. So instead of fighting the urge or shaming myself for wanting something, I changed the timing of my decisions. Whenever the desire felt intense, I made it a rule not to decide anything in that moment. I wouldn't buy, I wouldn't compare prices, and I wouldn't talk myself into it. I would simply pause and walk away. What surprised me was how quickly that urgency faded. Sometimes it took a few hours, sometimes a day, but once the emotional peak passed, my perspective shifted. The same item suddenly felt less essential. I could see more clearly whether it actually fit my life, whether I already owned something similar, or whether I just wanted the relief that buying promised. This habit didn't make my life dull or restrictive. It made my spending calmer. When I did choose to buy something later, it felt intentional instead of reactive. And because the decision came from a grounded place, the satisfaction lasted much longer without guilt or regret attached. Over time, this completely changed how I relate to wanting things. I stopped treating urgency as a command and started treating it as information. Information that told me to slow down, not speed up. And once I stopped letting urgency control my spending, I started noticing something else. How much money was quietly slipping away through habits I didn't even realize I had. For a long time, I thought my money problems came from big purchases, expensive items, occasional splurges, things that were easy to remember. But when I actually sat down and looked closer, that wasn't where my money was going. It was disappearing quietly. Small purchases, automatic payments, things I barely noticed anymore because they had become part of my routine. A drink here, a small add-on there, subscriptions I no longer actively used but never canceled. None of them felt serious on their own, but together they added up faster than I expected. What changed everything was not budgeting harder, but making the invisible visible. I started writing down every small expense for a short period of time, not to judge myself, not to restrict anything, but just to observe. And that's when patterns appeared. I noticed which days I spent more. Without realizing it, what emotions usually came before those small purchases, and which expenses didn't actually improve my life at all. The moment you see these patterns, something shifts. You don't feel deprived, you feel informed, you begin to recognize which spending habits are automatic, not intentional. And once something becomes conscious, it becomes optional. This doesn't mean cutting everything out. It means choosing what deserves to stay. Some small expenses are worth it because they genuinely add comfort or joy. Others are simply leftovers of old habits that no longer serve you. By tracking invisible spending, you give yourself back control without pressure. Your money starts aligning with how you actually want to live, not how your habits quietly push you to live. And when you reach this point, there's one final mindset shift that ties everything together, the one that made the biggest difference for me. And once you finally see where your money is really going, the last step isn't about spending less. It's about deciding what kind of life you actually want your money to support. And this is the tip many people are waiting for, not because it sounds smart or dramatic, but because this is the one that quietly changes everything you think you know about spending money. After all the tips, before this, stopping emotional spending, slowing down decisions, noticing invisible habits, I realized something important. None of them truly worked until I stopped asking, how do I spend less? And started asking, what kind of life do I want my money to support? For a long time, I was spending reactively. I spent when I was tired, when I was stressed, when I wanted convenience or comfort in that moment. And even when I managed to cut back, it felt like I was constantly holding myself back instead of moving forward. So I tried a different approach. Before spending, I started asking myself one simple, quiet question. Does this move me closer to the life I want, or is it just filling a moment? Not every purchase needed a deep answer. But this question alone slowed me down enough to notice the difference between intentional spending and emotional spending. Some things immediately lost their appeal. Other things, even if they cost more, felt right because they aligned with the person I wanted to become, not just the mood I was in. This is when something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling guilty about money. When I chose to spend intentionally, there was no regret afterward. And when I chose not to spend, it didn't feel like deprivation, it felt like clarity. Over time, my spending naturally shifted. I didn't force discipline. I didn't follow strict rules. I simply stopped funding a lifestyle that drained me and started supporting one that actually gave me energy space and peace of mind. If you take only one thing from this video, let it be this. You don't need extreme budgeting or perfect self-control. You need direction. When you know what kind of life you want, your money decisions become easier, and everything we talked about in the previous tips starts working together. That's when money stops being something you fight with and becomes something that works for you. Before ending this video, I just want to say one thing. Changing the way you spend money doesn't start with discipline numbers or strict rules. It starts with awareness, noticing why you spend, how you feel when you spend, and what you actually want your money to do for you. All 10 tips I shared today aren't about forcing yourself to spend less. They're about helping you pause, think, and choose more intentionally. You don't have to apply everything at once. Even trying one small change can already make your relationship with money feel lighter. If you're watching this and thinking this feels like me, then you're not bad with money. You're just human living in a world that constantly encourages comfort, speed, and instant relief. Learning to slow down is already a big step. So instead of aiming to be perfect, aim to be honest. Honest about what you need, what you're avoiding, and what kind of life you want to build. Thank you for spending your time with me today. If this video helped you even a little, I'm really glad you were here. Take care of yourself and your money will start taking care of you too. And if you feel like a lot of this spending pressure is tied to how heavy or cluttered your space feels, the next video might really help. I'll be sharing simple, realistic changes that made my home feel calmer almost immediately, nothing extreme, just things you can try right away.